Hey everyone, I hope you're well playing and are making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, Max Pez. But not only do you have my silky tones to caress your ears, we're also joined by a very special guest. The absolute pleasure is all mine to finally have this lovely man, this ball of brilliant energy with us. I want to introduce you all to Robin-Yann Storm. That is a tool UX designer and workflow consultant. Robin, thank you so much for joining me today.
And thank you very much for having me on, Max. I really appreciate it. This is great fun.
Yeah, man, it's been good. We've just been talking a bit off the air, and we met over at GIC, which was that October last year, or no, or before that, was it?
That's been a while ago now. Yeah, we were
Yeah.
both sitting at the CD Project talk. We were talking about things. It was great.
Yes. Yeah, mate. No, it was a good one for that, and yeah, and since then you've been flying and jet setting around the world, mate. It's been quite an adventure for you.
It absolutely has been. It's been great. I can highly recommend to anyone to get a global entry if you ever visit the US. That makes the border crossing a lot faster and easier. But yeah,
Yes.
it's been a lot of flying around, visiting conferences, talking to a lot of people. It's been great, tiring but great.
But first, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than me. What I've done, everyone, and I hope you're excited for this, is I've actually created a level design kind of store. What I've done in this store is put up different kinds of tips and tricks that you can find there, whether that be my actual ebook itself to that of level design pamphlets focused on different things such as traversal, stealth, breaking into the industry, as well as different talks that I have done which you cannot find anywhere else other than on this store. So if you are looking to improve on your level design skills and processes, then check out the Level Design Store, which will be down in the description below, where there'll be a link to find this. All you need to do is head over to gumroad.com/level design lobby. I hope you like what you see, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you, and now back to the show.
I can imagine, mate. And for those who don't really know or maybe aren't aware of a man in your position, what is that of a tool UX designer, mate?
Sure. Because it is a little bit new still. It's sort of it is and it isn't. There's a complicated history where, generally, back in the 70s and 80s, some people in the software world were like, "Hey, shouldn't we make software easier to use? Shouldn't we make a better user experience?" And then you had
Mm.
Don Norman of UX fame doing that for Apple back in the day, being the very first user experience person working at a company. And throughout the years, I've worked as a texture artist, a 3D artist, level designer, scripter, all kinds of things. And doing a lot of level design as well, a lot of different things. And doing all those jobs, I used a lot of different tools. And in using those tools, I started to notice, wow, these are often hard to use and not really easy to use. What
Mm.
really someone should do something about this, and then nobody did. And I figured, all right, I'll go and do it myself. This should change. I really felt that there should be a change, and that there should be a user experience designers for tools for the big editors that we have internally, and also for the ones that are built externally like Unity and Unreal, right? um,
Yeah.
and so I just started doing it. I did some consulting for Unity store level editors, which was great fun.
Wow.
Then got hired at IO Interactive to do it for them. And really, what it kind of is this idea of we have these tool sets. These are usually really big tool sets where you have
Mm.
audio, material, scripting, level design, geometry creation, NPC spawning, lighting. We have all these things that people need to do inside a tool. How do you uh, put that into a place where it's easy and nice to use? So the UI
Yeah.
is in the right place, the tools are in the places where you expect them, and you have these workflows that feel nice to use. It's this kind of idea of like if someone works 8 hours a day or maybe 10 or 12, depending on the crunch that's going on. We hope not, but if they do, that they have a fun and easier time working with it, where they can do things and feel creative and feel sort of free to do the things that they want to do, and not
Mm,
be frustrated, because especially if you're frustrated, it makes it
yeah.
much tougher to work. So a lot of the work that I'm currently doing is workflow consulting, is talking with companies about trying to figure out what is the project that you need to make, and what kind of workflows do we look at when making that particular thing. Like, if for example,
Right.
you are making a game and you want to make a
Yeah.
trailer sometime in the future, what kind of tooling would a trailer need? Like, what kind of tooling do we need to think about right now, like two
Yeah.
years before we ever make that trailer, to figure that thing out? Or if we want to build geometry for this kind of game, how do we make sure that we know what kind of geometry creation do we need? Do we need just like boxes that we can place? Do we need like all kinds of different shapes? And then working through that to find out,
Mm.
okay, so how do we texture those? How do we add materials? How do we, add nav meshes to that? Like, it grows in scope very quickly. So that's the workflow consulting. And then the tool UX
Right.
designing is very much trying to figure out from a UI and UX point of view, what does that tool look like? How is it easy to use? How can people click
Mm.
from one thing to the next and have fun doing that work?
I'm curious then, mate, because like you said, you're trying to find the best way to help people. Is there any
Yes.
kind of like general rules for it? Like I've heard one which is you never go like more than three menus deep or something as an example. But again, that's just me hearing things, not necessarily something that I've worked with. How do you come up with and learn, I guess, the best practices for each discipline? As you talked about working for trailers to making something, do require different kind of workflows in general.
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of things that go over all these different UX and UI disciplines. Like, there's the classic heuristics, essentially, like usability heuristics. Like, let's think of one, like consistency. Like, like if a
Yeah.
green button is good and a red button is bad, then make sure that that is that case in all cases. That's a thing that no
Right.
matter what kind of UI you're making, that immediately sounds like it makes sense, right? um, or like error prevention, like
Yeah.
that if a user cannot easily make errors, and that if an error does happen, that it's clearly explained to them, that it makes sense to what's going on, what they can do about it, and it doesn't just
Mm.
go fatal error closed, right? It's those
Yeah.
kinds of things, because we've all had to deal with those, and there's some in the UX field who also kind of go for, hey, minimalist design, like it needs to be very minimalist and sort of in that way easy to use. But
Yeah.
that's where in some cases I differ a little bit when it comes to tools UX, because with tools we have these really big tool sets, these really big editors, and if you
Yeah.
have that many features, then you can't really limit it that easily. That doesn't mean we need to just put everything out there, and the moment it's like you're entering a cockpit on an airplane, you're like, whoa, what are all these buttons? Like that, that's a little bit too much. But there's definitely the case of like, hey, if you need to go 4 or 5 levels deep for a specific thing, just because we have that many features and it's a feature that's not that often used and it needs to be somewhere, then it
Mm.
can be okay, depending on all these different factors of the project that we're working on, the people that are part of that project. So with tools UX, it's a little bit more complex to try to figure out what is usable, because you are in a lot of
Mm.
cases expecting not a sort of like random off the street person to pick the tool up,
Yeah.
but a professional to work in this thing 8 hours a day for like 4 years or maybe more, on a single project, which is just a little bit different from a UX standpoint.
Yeah, mate. I think it's fascinating because it is a I guess some people may not even be aware, especially for those aspiring to be in the industry or just avid players of games, that the amount of time that you can lose to that of having clunky menus or just elements not working how you think they're going to work is quite
Hmm.
a lot if you were able to time it throughout the entire project, right? So it's quite a crazy one, and
Exactly.
just how important it is, as you're saying, to break it down. But yeah, I don't envy you guys now in terms of like just the whole, as you said, engines can do so much now. There is so much scope to it,
Yes.
and to try figure and unify everything. that I can imagine is the biggest battle for all of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a battle of UI, but also of the engineering, right? Because
Mm.
a lot of the time you can say like, "Hey, we want the UI to be different in this way," but then engineering kind of goes, "Hey, we're using this and this API. We can't do that easily. Like you're asking for some kind of custom control." And sometimes the custom control is good and can work out, but quite often it's a very difficult and time consuming thing to implement. And so you have to find the much easier way to do those things with the existing UI that you have. So there's a lot of limitations as well, where as a tool UX designer, you're working with the users, the engineers, with the
Mm.
marketers, like the whole company, to try and figure out together how can we build this in a way that gets us the most bang for buck, because we're not able to do everything. That just like
Yeah.
with a game, we'd
Yeah.
love
Yeah. Yeah.
to, but it's not possible. You have to make cuts. But it's the that question, similar as with building a game, of where do you make those cuts? Where are the good cuts to make, and what are the things that
Yes.
we definitely cannot cut?
Yeah, that must be a tough call on that one especially with more and more studios. Well, maybe you can actually correct me if I'm wrong here, but I found that more and more studios seem to be making their own editors at this moment in time. I don't know if that will switch at some point, but I imagine that can be such a challenge as well for everything.
Absolutely. Like there's a lot of people making in-house tools, and
Mm.
it's difficult for a lot of them because in a lot of cases they don't really have UX designers on staff, or it's sort
Right.
of like a job that someone does sometime, and that makes it a little bit more difficult to really get the full scope of it. But it's curious. One thing that I've seen happen a lot lately is a lot of people are switching to Unreal. A lot of companies
Yes.
kind of going, "Hey, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore. We're done building an in-house editor and engine. We're going to switch entirely to Unreal." And there's like
Mm.
bigger companies doing that, right? And that's
Yes.
really, really surprised me. Is that kind of change, especially with companies that have really marketed their engine and editors like, "Hey, look at us. This is our thing. We're doing this so
Yep.
well." And now they are also, and using Unreal or entirely switching to Unreal. And I'm seeing that happening more.
Yeah.
So I'm curious where this is going.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I've been noticing that a bit as well, and I'm wondering because if it's more, if it's a few thing, right? Like one is obviously not only is it the cost to build an engine, which takes a lot of time and energy, as we know, but it's finding the
Hmm.
right people to be able to make that engine, which I imagine is
Oof.
very challenging. And to have them, as you said, right, you only have a certain amount of time to make it. Uh, and if you're fortunate enough, like I remember working on Snowdrop for Division, that has been now used for multiple projects, Division 1 and 2, all the DLCs, and even on for South Park, which you wouldn't think about it, but they are using the exact same engines. But it's, from what I've heard, it's only gotten better and better because people keep using it. But as you're saying, if, for example, you keep making a new editor from start, then it very much becomes even, I guess, even harder to reasonably go off and use or stick to it. And you're seeing a lot more, I imagine, with graduates as well, right? That more and more students are using Unreal, and maybe that's another thing as well. The fact that a lot of people have skill in that engine as well. But I'm just pure speculation.
No, totally. It's I think that we've seen a lot over the last many years is students especially having become more used to Unity and Unreal, where they
Mm.
they graduate and they have those experiences already. And I think that that is also one of the really big reasons that larger companies are switching to Unreal. It's because the amount of people they can hire, that sort of pool they can hire from, just gets that much bigger because there are people with a
Yeah.
lot of experience in Unreal. Like if you want to make a new tool internally, that tool can be absolutely amazingly custom for your exact use. But to get someone to work on that will probably take a lot of upkeep in getting that person started, getting to understand the code base, doing all that work. While
Mm.
in Unreal, if you have someone who has like known how to make Unreal plugins for this many years or has grown up
Yeah.
doing that, in that case, it becomes a little bit easier to onboard that person and kind of go, "Hey, this thing you already know about, can you make this thing in it?" That doesn't mean that that work itself isn't still very custom, depending on the work that needs to be done. But the onboarding has surely helped a lot.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
For sure, man. Do you know what, the fascinating thing now with Unreal? I'm sure you saw the stuff they announced at GDC with 5.2. It has amazed me and also saddened me that for so long the organization structure in Unreal has just been not the best. You know, like you can't, if you create a folder, you can't select the folder to then make sure anything you drag in goes into the folder. It's all retroactive, right? And it's seen level design instances, or level instances, sorry, as they're called, and the one file per actor, I think are great step forwards. But I'm amazed that that hadn't been thought about sooner from me. And so I'm trying not to make it sound like a dig or anything. It's just interesting because, as you know, with them working on films and TV, trying to balance the two mediums must be really hard for them as well.
Yeah, because the workflows between them are so very different, especially between offline rendering and real-time rendering. There's just such a difference where with offline rendering, especially the sizes of assets are just that much bigger, and you're just working in really particular ways where you have a particular camera angle, for example, and that's the camera angle you're working with, and that's the way we're showing things. While in games, no, that player could just turn around, hop on a box, and just see outside. Like you just, it's such a different workflow of like having to place assets. Even like something as basic as placing assets is just that much different. And honestly, I don't think it's that much of a dig. Indeed, there's a talk I gave at GDC 2016, which you can find on my website as well, ristorm.com. And it's a talk in 2016 in which I do a comparison between all kinds of editors and engines. So I talk about like Hammer, Skyrim Creation Kit, 3ds Max, Source, Unity, Unreal, and just talking about all those and looking at the good and bad of each editor. Like it's really interesting, for example, to see that Source with its Hammer editor for geometry purposes, like just able to quickly build a level, is absolutely the best one. Like it's really fast and easy to set something up, to texture it really fast, to get some trims on the edges. You know, like it's super fast and good at doing those things. And in Hammer 2, I've heard it's only improved and it's amazing. While in other editors, that can be really slow and painful, especially if later on you want to make a change to it. So it's definitely these things of all these editors and engines do things in good or bad ways, or well, maybe good and less good ways would be a better way of saying it. Where they can also just learn from each other, right? Where you look at these different tools and you're using them, you're like, hey, why doesn't this tool also do it in this way? Or hey, why doesn't this tool also do it in this way? Like there's these cool things that are happening out there. And that's also just, I think, really, really important here, where I think it'd be cool if a lot of people would share more about the tooling that they create and about the workflows that they've been using. And then we've definitely seen that happen more and more over the years. Like when I first gave that talk in 2016, tool design wasn't a thing yet. Like I was saying like, hey, you should hire a tool designer. And people were like, what's that? I'm like, it's new. It's going to be different, but here's a talk that explains what it is. And over the years, it's grown more and more and more. There's also this great community, the Toolsmiths, which has a website on the toolsmiths.org, And there's a lot of just people like in that Discord just talking to each other about the tools that they have internally, about um, the workflows that they have with them. There's a UX channel in there, and it's just kind of like sharing to each other of these kinds of tools and how to make level design easier, material editing
Mm.
easier, and doing all those things that is really important. So I think it is important to mention the things that are not good by editors. To mention like, hey, this isn't as nice as I'd like it to be, or hey, this is frustrating,
Yeah.
so that we have a better idea of like how can this improve. Because the moment you do a comparative analysis on other editors, you realize, oh, actually this can be a lot better.
Well, it's funny you mention your GDC talk. I remember sharing that back when I worked at CD Projekt Red. We were using our own custom engine. I think it was Red Engine 3 or 4 at the time. And yeah, mate, I remember you sending your talk to some of the tool designs we had, and also that again of the internal for the LD team for us to kind of collect. It wasn't just me; there were others who were working hard to figure out how to improve it. But yeah, it is. It was really helpful. So thank you for doing that talk, mate. So I say it reached us, and it was really beneficial.
Awesome, thank you, and also just thank you for sharing it. It was very much the thing. It's like let me look at it right now. It has 44,000 views.
That's
So it's very
amazing,
much this thing of like I'm very happy that it got shared so much and went around so much, and so many people have looked at it and talked about it. Because it's only when we talk about our tool sets and critically look at them that we can get that kind of improvement.
mate. Yeah, mate. No, I completely agree, and it's so fascinating just to hear though that you know how much your career changed in terms of just seeing how things need to be improved and just wanting to be part of the process to improve them. And I guess what was
hmm
the final step that really pushed you to go? Do you know what this is how I want to work moving forward?
I think it was the point where I really thought it was important, and then I didn't see anyone doing it. Like I didn't
Mm.
see any other people trying to do this thing. And whenever I used the tool myself, and I did level design every single day, um, it just became this thing of like, this really, someone should do something about this. So it was almost out of like spite of just like, this should be better. Like, why isn't this better? Like this, like user experience for software isn't this new field, but so how come we're not doing it for game development tools?
Yeah.
And I just, yeah, that really just like got me to do it, and I was just very excited about it too. Like I was just happy doing it and excited to doing it. And the moment I started doing it, I learned a lot, of course, but also a lot of people found it very helpful.
Mm.
Like I talked to those people who made like Unity asset store level editors, and they were happy with the work that I was doing. Right,
Yeah.
like they were happy about getting that feedback and getting a critical eye at things and getting an idea about like, hey, what can we do to improve these things? And that was just really, really important. That was just great to hear those things. And over
Mm.
the years, that's also kind of remained the same. And also a big reason why I keep doing it is seeing the smiles on people's faces. Like when I started working at IO Interactive on the Glacier 2 editor, it's
Mm.
just you would make these changes, you would make these additions or edits to the tool, and people would be mailing each other like, "Oh, have you seen this? This is awesome. Well, we can
Wow.
do this now. Oh, that changes my whole workflow." And then when I worked at Guerrilla on the Decima editor, a very similar
Mm.
thing of like, we released a feature and people were like, "Oh, now we can do this and this, and oh, this just feels so much better, and this is easier, and this shaves so much time, and we don't have to import export." Like removing those things that are annoying to people just
Yeah.
gives me such a boost and such a happiness of people are just having a happy time working instead of being frustrated.
Mate, that's just great to hear. And as I say, it must be. I mean, well, I want to ask: is it different from? Because for so long, we work on games, hoping to to wait years sometimes to hear public opinion that people enjoy it. And I guess for you, it's obviously part of it hearing about the game. But what's it like to get, like you're saying, seeing this feedback throughout the process? Is obviously you really want to work on focusing on making sure that the process itself is the best that it can be.
Exactly. It's a big thing of you are the support class essentially. Like you will
That's a
get very
great way to
direct
put it.
feedback when healing someone. Like you will immediately get feedback, and that's great and helpful. But then if they make the big kill because you healed them, they get the big kill. It's their victory. So it's very much like once a game is released, you can say that you've worked on the editor, but you haven't really worked on the game. Like you worked on the
Mm.
editor that helped make the game, but you haven't really worked on the game. So it's always this kind of support role that's a little bit difficult to quantify when it comes to just crediting and how to talk about it. I've worked on the Glacier 2 editor on which the Hitman series is built, sure, but I was present for like the end of Hitman 1 and the beginning of Hitman 2. So it's like I
Right.
can't take credit for like the whole series and working on that stuff, but it is, it does make me happy knowing that a lot of the tools that we've added to Glacier 2 with this great team of engineers at IO Interactive and at Mipumi, we were able to do such amazing things. But I'm sure they're still using a lot of those things right now. And that makes me really
Yeah.
happy. Of like those tools that you make exist for a much longer time than the game exists. Like those tools will exist for 10, 20, 30 years. And
Yeah.
that game is made, but then the next game is made, and then the next game is made, and then the next game is made, and they're still using a lot of those tools. And some of them will disappear over time, but it's nice to have that idea of you made someone happy immediately, just like
Yeah.
resolving a thing that they were frustrated about, and at the same time knowing, hey, this thing is going to be used for that much longer and it's going to make people happy. You're not going to see it, but you do know they're going to be happy about it. And lastly, I think there's this thing of sometimes you watch like a trailer or you
Yeah.
play a game and you look at it and you kind of go, ah, they made this because of that tool. Like I can see this wouldn't have been made
Mm.
if that tool did not exist. And that is honestly like a super fun thing where that credit will never be as direct as that. But as a tool designer, you look at it kind of go, oh, this is like they couldn't have made this shape without tool X, or they couldn't have done this sequence without tool Y. And you
Yeah.
look at it and you kind of go, oh, that's great. I'm so happy they were able to do these amazing things that have made them happy to create this awesome content.
Right, that's so cool. Because I never thought about it from that perspective, but it is because yeah, the helpful upgrades that are made from you guys making these tools is so important throughout development. It's incredible. And I wanted to ask because it's not very often I get another kind of consultant and contractor like myself on, and I don't think it's really spoken about much. I try to speak about it a bit, but to have yourself on here, I guess a couple questions, mate. What made you want to switch to try contracting, and I guess how have you found it, and how long has it been going for now, mate?
It's been going for almost a year now. So before this, I
Congratulations.
worked at thank you for at Apple for a few many
Mm,
years. First in Amsterdam and then in California for a while. Then I moved back to the Netherlands to do the consulting. And honestly, it's been great fun talking to a lot of different people. And
yeah.
a big reason for doing it is because I want the tool UX design field to expand and improve and grow.
Mm,
It's this thing that I've noticed over the years where a lot more people have become tool designers. Like it's a job now that studios hire for. Like you can Google
right.
for it and you will find roles at studios that do it, and that makes me super happy because that wasn't the case before 2016. Absolutely not. And there are great people who have shared things before that because I didn't know this when I started it, but like David Lightbound, he's a UX director for the technology group at Ubisoft. He
Right.
wrote a book about tool design
Yeah.
called "Designing the User Experience of Game Development Tools." It's a very on the nose title, like it tells you exactly what it's about. Like it's great, and it's this thing where there's that book, um, and there's really not that much out there. Like if you were to
Mm,
Google, for example, how to make an asset browser, you will probably get 1,000 articles about how to make the data format in the exact way where it can load as fast as possible. Like from an engineering standpoint,
yeah.
there'll be 100 articles out there and research papers explaining to you how to do this in a proper way. You'll maybe find one, if you're lucky, like on a design level of like, how do you make an asset browser easy to use? Like, how do you build one so that
Mm,
people can find the assets that they're looking for? And I think that is really like a critical thing that we're missing in not just the games industry, but generally in the 3D editor industry. Like even looking
yeah.
at architecture, medical, Houdini, like all those different like really specialized tools is how do you make that better? And
Mm,
now that I'm not at a company, I have the freedom to post blogs and to write and to make videos and to put that out there for free. And so I've been doing that on my website, writing a lot of articles about, like, how do you make sure that people find the assets that they need in an asset browser? Like, what's the design that you need? And how do you find out what the issue is that the user has when they ask for a feature? So you don't just make the feature exactly as they say, because a lot of the times you do that as a UX designer or tools engineer, and they are really unhappy about it in the end, because you have to find out why exactly they need it, and in what way they need it, and thinking about per workflow of, like, hey, like, people asking for these tools, that's great. What is the workflow that they need? Like, they're coming from A, they want to go to Z. What are all the different things in that workflow that they need? Not just these particular tools, but what is the workflow between them? So I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of, like, videos on those kinds of things to expand that more as a knowledge base, because I think I just really deeply feel it is necessary. Like, how can we really help make tool UX better as an industry?
Yeah, mate. I think it's amazing, mate. Yeah, it's the same similar reason when I started making this podcast is I was like, man, there's not much out there on level design. So I imagined, as you said, it's even more specific moving forward with it as well, mate. So yeah. And I want to ask then, with contracting, mate, what do you think has been the most difficult element for you?
Honestly, the most difficult element is just getting the contract set up in a way that works for everyone. It's a lot of conversations with companies of trying to figure out, hey, these are our needs, these are our NDAs.
Yeah.
Hey, this is our needs, these are our NDAs, and then you have to walk through them, talk with a lawyer, figure out if all
Yes.
this works. Especially if you have multiple countries, which I most often work with international
Yeah.
companies, is trying to figure out, okay, this is their country, how does it work there? Okay, this is our country, how does it work here?
Yes.
Are we all happy about this? Like, honestly, that's the most time consuming and difficult part, because once you sit down with them and you talk with them, everyone wants to make things better, everyone's interested. It's a fun and awesome and great thing to do. It's getting to that point in the freelancing world that's, to me, has always been so far the tough thing to do.
Yeah, mate. No, it's a good point for it with that, mate. So yeah. And I say I'm just looking at the time, mate, and I don't want to take up much more of your time for it, but just thank you, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and just you sharing more of your experience, your knowledge, and not even just on this, but also like that on your website. So we'll have that in the description down below as well, link to your Twitter as well. So if you do want to reach out to Rob, you can do so for that. Is there any way that they can best reach out to you, or anything else you want to share, mate, with the community?
Best way to reach out is probably Twitter, for as long as it's still alive. I don't know when this podcast goes live, but we'll see if Twitter's still around then. And if not, you can find me on Mastodon, or you can find me on my website, which is really if none of those work, then my website and just emailing me there is probably the best thing. And the biggest thing that I love to share is please read the articles that I've posted. There's a lot of work I'm also currently doing with USD, Universal Scene Description, which is Pixar's 3D file format / API / framework. And it's trying to explain to people what USD is. Like, how does it work? You're like, maybe you've heard about it, but you're like, this sounds super confusing. And so it's trying to explain things like that. And I'm also just looking for more eyes on those things to get more feedback on that. So we have an idea of, like, what is easy to understand and what is simple and quick in getting that information to people. Because especially right now, if you look up anything to do with USD, you will get thrown into a jargon pit, and you will have no idea really what's going on, because there's so much jargon going on. And I'm trying to really improve those things. And then there's all the other articles about, like, the Unreal versus Unity from a UX standpoint, how to resolve tool UX debt, and all those kinds of things, and the power of spatial documentation. Like, how do you document things in a level designy way, where instead of people having to go into, like, a Confluence page and there's a Slack thread here and an email thread there, they can find all the information they need right where they are working. It's focusing on a lot of those, like, workflow improvements of how do you make that easier to do, because the end goal here is to just make people's lives happier and easier on a day-to-day basis. So if those articles can help you get to that point, that's really what I'm looking for. Like, they're out there for free. I just want to help more people in and grow this tool UX profession, really.
Dude, that's amazing. I'll have a link to all of that. I'll have a link, like I said, to your talk to GDC as well, mate. And yeah, just again, thank you, man. I really appreciate your time for coming on. And if you want to get in contact with me, you can do so over Twitter, which is @MaxPairs. Email into the show, leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. And if you want to support the show, please head over to patreon.com. So thanks, everyone. And thanks again for having me. And all the best. Cheers. Bye.